Right, so we're just going through this script. This is what was used. If I was to take someone's name, bastardize it with syntax and create contracts with, then would I not be guilty of fraud? If I was to take a name title that someone thought was theirs and copyrighted it, and then every time they used it, I implied they had a performance of obligation to me or my organisation. And if they did not comply with my game of fraud, I got my friends to abduct them, then would I not be guilty of breaking the law? I'm in a storm event and witness the fact that ESUS, put whatever name you like in there, signed his consent for his rights to be administered by any other organisation other than HMCTS Corporation, and that not enter to be the surety for the legal victim Hughes. Cardiff Admin Corps agent Ella stated that no one can stand surety to anyone when she refused to accept a previous application for the same being, and that he would have to stand surety to himself. If that is true, then why is this court attempting to apply ESUS is standing surety to Hughes? I once was granted the right of use of the equitable rights of Natalie family Hughes to lay this claim with, however, she severed our agreement and revoked her consent, and yet I have continued to use it in the same way that HMCTS Crown and all agents thereof continue to imply obligation of performance by us by doing the exact same thing. This was done in order to evidence and have this court determine that actions taken by the administration committed the same act are guilty of fraud, rendering all incarcerations unlawful that are created through coercing people to lay claim to something that is not theirs to use, and incriminating them for not complying with such a fraud or performing obligations implied under such terms and conditions. This is to defraud the fraud. You have a right to contract or not contract. A Tinky snoring in the background. It is my understanding that in order for any incarceration to be lawful, those laying the claim are obliged to have proof to prove their claim, which is what I believe you are now asking of me. You are asking me to prove that an unlawful claim was legal, not lawful. You can't ask me if it was lawful, because the very fact that I'm here having to make a claim to counter the claim or to rebut the claim or make an application to rebut the claim or demur it means that if there is no evidence of victim, then there is no breaking of the law, which means that you're adding to the administration of the law, which means that it's unlawful. The you are doing is the fact that let's say the burden of the proof. To prove that the unlawful claim that has been used is unlawful, I believe it would be, and is very easy to prove whether my claim is valid or not, or rather the application of the claim, by the presentment of a contract and or assignment of consent that ESUS, anybody, has entered into with any of the private corporations that are responsible for implying ESUS failed to perform the obligations of. I'm also of the understanding that a habeas corpus, thank you, that a habeas corpus. Now we're talking understanding. What are you prepared to stand under? Oh, well, I'm prepared to, I'm stand on it, that a habeas corpus is required. Application is specifically for that reason, for the party responsible for the initial claim that caused incarceration to bring their evidence of victim in the body being claimed against being held unlawfully incarcerated. If that wasn't the situation in the first place, that if any of these claims had been lawful, there would be a victim from there. And there would be evidence to prove that something had happened. But the fact that the claim, the original claim, comes from an origin of fraud, anything that comes after that point is unlawful, and it needs to be struck out. Burden of proof being with those that make the original claim. I am witness to the fact that ESUS, anybody who has assigned their consent and equitable rights unto another organisation in order to prevent them from being expressed or implied elsewhere, rendering any claim of implied consent being granted to the organisation you, the court, represent null and void. As there is no contract between ESUS, HMCTS, HMG, Crown Corporation, then when one or any of their agents attempt to force obligations, that would then be statutory rape. The fact that ESOS has been incarcerated for an original false claim, the fact that there is no valid contract between anyone and any legal admin system, upon the burden of proof being with the party laying the original claim, upon the fact that this matter came about because somebody was implying there was a contract or obligation or assignment that we have just established is created through fraud, i.e. the legal title, bastardised name, upon consideration of those facts, that is why this application was filed, as all incarceration based upon such fraudulent conditions is and always will be unlawful. Adding to the administration of the law is unlawful. Administrative law, aka legal, cannot then be law. And all claims made by admin court agents are therefore unlawful, not just this one with ESOS. As the terms and conditions of the creation of the birth certificate are not fully disclosed to those registering others without their consent, upon such an act, any obligation to perform any performance based upon such grounds are fraudulent and unlawful, as has already been established. Even by civil code standards, if I was to not disclose the T's and C's of contracts I encouraged another to enter into with me, I would be guilty of fraud and false claim. If I was to take a title belonging to another, in this case Crown Corps, and claim it as mine and fix contracts with it as established, as established by the company, which was established previously, then I would be guilty of fraud. What if I then went and got my buddies to abduct those who failed to perform said obligations, even though my employed contract is fraudulent? Would that not amount to terrorism? And is that not unlawful? Because that is what is happening every day, not just in this case, but with all incarcerations achieved through the utilisation of legal fictions, last name first, first last, and capitalised upon by admin codification. His counterclaim is laid upon that it is my comprehension that 1, if there is no contract, then there's no obligation to perform. 2, to imply obligation and void of valid contracts, I'm guilty of statutory rape and false claim. 3, the agencies who have implied obligations do not have a valid contract and the consent is assigned that once could be applied through such fraudulent conditions by legal minors. So even if my consent is still implied to be assigned, I'm a legal minor at that point. If my consent is assigned to a legal fiction, then by default, I'm a legal minor. I haven't reached legal majority. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I need a government. 4, therefore, any action taken is unlawful, including but not exclusively incarceration under such conditions. 5, as the burden of proof lies with the claimant of the original claim that caused this application to be required, and that the whole purpose of habeas corpus is to examine the evidence to have exemplified a victim and hear the body, then it will be the very least for them to prove the incarceration is lawful by presentment of a contract entered into knowingly with all its T's and C's disclosed between ESOS and the legal entities. That is just basic contract codified law. Where is the contract? Where is the evidence that ESOS agreed to stand surety to the legal fiction accused Daniel? So you can just take these people, edit it, because it applies to all of you. Without evidence that such a contract exists, the agents impersonating police and judges are guilty of impersonation, and therefore ESOS was right to arrest them, as this is his only obligation to perform, as is all our obligation to uphold the law and not break it in the name of legal fiction or in the name of anything else. Those persecuting those who refuse to comply with criminals or support terrorism or aid and abet crime could not possibly by any lawful definition be police or judges. The very implication that legal is lawful is unlawful and a false claim in itself. So because that went in, and because of what happened in the process of the administrative court hearing for the habeas corpus for 1852 finally got supposedly heard on Wednesday, was that I obviously asked the judge, if I take your name and fix a contract with it, what's that? And he said, I'll disregard that. So it's no longer unlawful. It's not fraud anymore if I lay a claim and say it's me, because that's what's happened here. So there are so many ways that you can play this. You can even blame the trust. Because that's what you're doing. So in exactly the same way that ESOS wrote to Crown Corporation and said, I don't have any trust in you, I believe you're operating a cult, and I assign and withdraw my consent from being implied to be granted and crediting your corporation or organisation. His sister actually said those things and wrote those things to me after the incident on Facebook. And so I had to put the court on notice that I once had the assignment of consent in order to lay the application. And it's not a claim, they want to call it a claim at that point. It's very clear, it's an application to make a claim or to rebut a claim, to counterclaim. They are the ones that made the original claim. You are not here to make a claim. You are here to quieten the presumption that a claim was being made by you, really, in all instances. So when I said to him that obviously this assignment of consent has been removed and revoked, and at this point, obviously, the claim should stop, the barrister who'd tried to get somebody to identify themselves as something other than the party who laid the original claim, I'd asked, what was your name? Well, it's Themis to you. And then, is that Mr. and Mrs. or Miss? Well, you either don't know what it is that you're asking me, or you're trying to coerce me to contract with you. And so that's under non-disclosure. I don't wish to speak to you. I'm not here to speak to you. And he said, well, can you spell it? So, okay, I'll spell it for you. And then he said, well, my name is Charles Althorpe or whatever. And I said, can you prove that? And he said, yes, of course I can. How are you going to do that? I'm going to give you a shot. I can pull out my driving license and I can show you, but that doesn't say Charles Althorpe, does it? It says Althorpe, Charles, capitalized letters. And that's not what your mum called you, is it? And then the clerk of the court pops up shouting, stop it, please, stop it. Because they knew where we were going with this. Now, where we were going with this is if they'd stopped the claim, which they should have stopped the claim, because we put them on notice that we no longer had the assignment of consent in order for us to have the authority to act. To imply that we had the authority to act would have been unlawful. So we were actually exemplifying truth. This is the truth. This is what's happened. And they, the judge said, I'm going to disregard that. He's not going to take that into consideration. So now what you've just, because if they had and said, right, okay, well, and the barrister shouting, based on what she just said, we need to stop the case, and really we should have let him go with that. But I said, I'm not speaking to you, this is overstepping the mark now, and now you're impersonating a judge. And so, but obviously the guy who ponces around in a red jacket with a white collar, let it go. So what he actually did is he condoned legal being lawful. He disregarded consent. He disregarded the unlawfulness of the legal system, and in doing so, he incriminated himself to such a degree that by him continuing with that claim, and it's still implying that even though we told him that the assignment of consent had been revoked from us, they knew that if they'd said at that point, then, well, okay, we'll have to stop the claim. Then all claims based on anybody who's revoked or assigned their consent from such a corporation would have all been dissolved at that point. What they did instead is they exemplified, either way we got them, obviously, at that point, they exemplified instead that it doesn't, what you said is that I disregard it. Okay, so if we take your name, fix a contract with it, based on your order that you've made there and your determination, then you'll disregard it. But what it says is that we now, what we said right at the beginning of this, but won't be recorded, is that the universe is screaming at you that you are creating this from your belief. Anybody can claim anything they like. They don't have to have any proof of claim. They don't have to have any validity. And we're seeing this, obviously, it's like the illusion of reality is so transparent now that it's been our creation of the hoax that we've been pulling over the wool over our eyes and saying somebody else is keeping me from knowing all of this, and it was just ourselves from going and doing these things that you've all been doing. It gives you okay, we'll find out what happens if I take my number plate off. I might not have completely grasped all of the aspects of all of the things, and I might not deliver it in a way that I've gone and actually practiced in the mirror a few times before I've gone and done this, and it might all come out in a completely different way. But whatever it is that you will experience is what you believe. So take all of that information and make it relate. You have to, in the training manual, it goes through this issue: recognize, relate, assimilate, and action. So you have to see yourself doing it. You have to recognize yourself in the role that you're going to play. You have to be able to relate the information that you've got to hand back to feeding this information back to yourself as a reflection of what it is that you know and what it is that you've experienced, in order for you to create the next outcome state. So then I know to do that, you need to assimilate it before you put it in action. It's no good putting it in action and then going, oh, fucking hell, what have we done? Because that is an unsecured creditor's mind that does that. So that's why the steps are set out the way that they're set out. And now what it means is that you've got the transcripts of that court case are going to be available for anybody who wants to go through them. And what you've effectively got is the right of use. You've got a document stamped to say that you've got a right of use of anything, and there's only you to define it as whether it's lawful or not. Now, that ain't that the truth. That's the complete truth. We can all pretend, and we will probably all have, when we all looking at the evidence around us, it's fair to say that that's been true, that we've all been believing and allowing ourselves to believe in something that hasn't been, let's say, conducive to our well-being. So if it is true that we're all creating from a place of presumption, and that's why effectively that Sir Wynn Williams turned around and said that he would have to disregard the false claim, because like the opening statement is, can you prove anything? Can't prove anything. All we can say is that we stand on something that we call LS or planet Earth or a rock, and that's it. You're here and now, that's it. And anybody who tries to imply that they've got the definition of what it is, that's a false claim. And so even going and saying, I'm claiming that somebody has been taking that name, fixing a contract with it, actually it's me. So if I'm guilty of anything, I'm guilty of taking a name that isn't mine, but Winnie Williams turned around and said he'd disregard that. So the administrative system collapsed on Wednesday because they only exist by the presumption that you are committing fraud, you're committing false claim. But as it's already been determined by the system itself, that as nobody can prove anything, then isn't everything false claim? And if if everybody stops claiming anything, then universal law remains intact, and there's no reason for the administrative system to be there to prosecute or persecute you anymore. They dissolve themselves. Now it's just the restoration of the rights of the people's mind to assimilate this information of what we've done this for, is so that there's no getting away from the truth now. It's there in your face. It's there on record. It's there in its transcripts. It's there with a stamp on it. It's as far as proof goes, you can't get any more proof that the very thing that you thought existed is standing there telling you that's a false claim. And nobody can prove it. They can't. It's like saying, okay, well, we've unlawfully incarcerated this guy or this woman. Now it's your job to prove to us it's unlawful. I can't prove something that doesn't exist. And so unlawful, anything unlawful doesn't exist. Because it's unlawful. If it's contrary to law, then it doesn't exist. And so we'll get back to that point before initiation, into that, it's got to avoid ab initio. There is no starting point to initiate this presumption into matter. And so even when I'm faced with this matter, now I'm the guy with the red coat on, even when I'm faced with this matter, what's the matter? I've got to disregard the matter. Why? Because I'm not an ipso facto jurisdiction. I am ignoratio elenchi. I am ignoring the facts about the matter. Because if I claim to be able, and that's what he did actually, he took it into another jurisdiction by mistake. He said at the end that he's dismissing the case because he's determined that the incarceration is not unlawful. Is not unlawful. He didn't say it's lawful. And so this is the word magic vibration, the way, it's not what you say, it's the way that you say it. And so it's double negative of a double positive, it's still getting you, it gets you the same result whichever way you dress it up. So I'm not actually saying the incarceration is lawful because nobody's proved it's lawful, but I can say that I haven't seen anything to prove that it's unlawful. Well, I can't. Something that's unlawful from the beginning is because it has no proof. So the fact that you've made that determination to say that you haven't seen any evidence that it's unlawful is the exemplification of the fraud that is so embedded and embroiled in the administrative system. It's the basis upon which it's implied to initiate from. It hasn't got anything. It's not looking for anything lawful. It can't. Even if I showed you something lawful, I would be making a claim that this is the law. This is it. Well, the universe is really saying to you, how the fuck do you know what it is? And that's why the thing about knowing that you know nothing, there is a place there waiting for you that it's thinking that you need to know this is blue, this is green, this is that, that is that, that is that. That column plus that column is that column. It's not actually. Because somebody fucks around with the formulas in the back of the Excel spreadsheet. And it's not. It's not what you think it is. Because everything that we've been thinking has been projected onto us, and we haven't got an original thought because we haven't gone to a place of 0 point yet and gone, do you know what? What about if I admit to myself that everything that I thought I knew, I'm actually, it's turned out it's just an illusion. And so if I'm compounding the 3D and the 2D now, I've got my 3-dimensional body, my illusionary mind now that I've got a 3-dimensional body, and that is me. And my paper fiction there, my straw man, my hue of a man, the bit in between the 1D, 2D and the 3D, put all that together in Fibonacci. I'm already in 5D. I'm already thinking in 5 dimensions anyway, because I'm looking at myself in the other dimensions, compounded in phi. So just by adding that upon itself, now I'm already at 8 dimension. And if I just allow the phi to carry on doing what phi does, I'm already at 13 dimensions. So what you're actually doing when you're doing these steps and going in there and you're taking your number plates off, it's not about taking the number plates off. All of us can leave the number plates on and we can pay that bit. We can go and exchange our energy, get some slave tokens. We can even go and break the legal acts and statutes and go and break commit non-victim crime in order for us to be able to survive in this illusion of freedom that we've all got. Or you don't. I'm not going to, because the only person that I'm kidding is myself. And as much as I've kidded myself, and I'm kidding myself, I'm going to see it reflected in the illusion that I'm creating around me. So the more that I realize that it's myself that I was kidding, the less you see the people, the reflection of that projection, the less you see of the people kidding themselves. because they're a reflection of you, and you're all one, aren't you? You're all me. So it's not a quick, you know, I'm gonna go through a straw man at them. It's what the vibration that you created in yourself as a being will be reflected around you. So has
Can't hear.
anybody got any questions about
Can't hear.